Emma Carter stepped off the plane at Charles Airport, her rolling suitcase bouncing softly on the polished floors. She paused for a moment, adjusting the strap of her small backpack, and breathed in the mix of scents: the faint aroma of fresh bread from nearby, the hint of exhaust from passing taxis, and the crisp freshness of early autumn air. She glanced around the bustling terminal, where travelers hurried to catch connecting flights. Families clutched children's hands tightly, and couples moved arm in arm, clearly savoring their vacation. Emma's outward appearance was that of an ordinary tourist: a casual jacket over a light sweater, jeans, sneakers, and a camera hanging loosely around her neck. To the untrained eye, she was just another face in the crowd. Yet there was something about her demeanor that set her apart. She moved with a quiet confidence, a measured calm in every step. Her gaze, however, scanned the environment constantly, taking in the smallest details: security patterns, crowd flow, exits, and potential obstacles. Her fingers absent-mindedly traced the strap of her bag, but behind her serene smile, her mind was already processing every nuance of her surroundings. This was no ordinary traveler. Emma had been trained for situations that demanded instant decision-making, rapid assessment, and precision under pressure. Though she had chosen to enjoy a leisurely vacation this week, her instincts remained finely tuned, like a coiled spring ready to respond at a moment's notice. She moved toward the taxi stand outside the terminal, observing the vehicles lined up and the drivers chatting idly. Her eyes flicked toward a van that lingered longer than the others. It was probably nothing, she reasoned, but her gut told her to remember it. She took mental notes, storing small pieces of information that might seem irrelevant to others but could later become critical. After securing a taxi, she sat back and looked out the window as the city approached, the sprawling urban landscape dotted with the warm, golden light of late afternoon. Paris was alive with tourists, locals, and the distant hum of traffic, but Emma's attention remained keen. She observed the way people moved, how street performers interacted with, and the subtle signals of security personnel scanning the crowds. Her first stop was a small near the Seine. She ordered a coffee, took a corner seat, and pulled out a small notebook, pretending to sketch the scene. In reality, she was taking in the details of the plaza across the street, the exits, the placement of, the proximity of nearby buildings. To the other patrons, she appeared absorbed in a leisurely activity, an ordinary tourist soaking in the charm of Paris. But Emma was simultaneously watching everything: a mother struggling to control her toddler, a group of teenagers laughing too loudly near a fountain, a delivery worker who seemed unusually nervous. Every observation was stored in her memory, catalogued for potential use, though no one around her could guess why. As she sipped her coffee, a light breeze carried the sounds of the city: street musicians tuning their instruments, conversations in French and English, the distant rumble of a passing bus. Emma's mind wandered briefly to the upcoming week of sightseeing and museums, but it never strayed far from awareness. She could enjoy the city, yes, but she also understood that ordinary life could change in a heartbeat. She had seen it before: emergencies that erupted without warning, requiring calm, decisive action. Emma had learned to remain composed when others panicked, to spot threats before they became crises, and to act when it mattered most. Other tourists occasionally glanced at her, some smiling politely, some returning her nod as she made brief eye contact. To them, she was just another traveler, a visitor who blended effortlessly with the scenery. They had no idea that the woman quietly observing the plaza and cataloging minor oddities could one day become the linchpin in a life-saving operation, orchestrating actions with skill born from years in the cockpit and training in high-pressure environments. For now, she remained invisible, a part of the crowd, yet poised on the threshold of extraordinary events that would reveal her true identity and her incredible bravery. Emma's second morning in Paris began with a crisp walk along the Seine. The city was alive, sunlight dancing off the water, and the aroma of freshly baked pastries tempting. Tourists clustered around famous landmarks, cameras snapping incessantly, while locals went about their routines, seemingly oblivious to the tension brewing beneath the city's surface. Emma moved deliberately, her eyes scanning everything. She noticed details most people ignored: a van parked unusually close to a crowd, a pair of men talking in low voices near the metro entrance, and a security guard who seemed distracted, scanning his surroundings intermittently. Small, almost imperceptible cues, but Emma's trained instincts recognized them instantly. She wandered into a narrow street lined with boutique shops, the chatter of conversations floating toward her. A street musician strummed a guitar, and children's laughter echoed off the buildings. Despite the calm, Emma's focus never wavered. She observed patterns, how crowds flowed where bottlenecks formed, which exits were accessible. To a casual observer, she might appear lost in thought, jotting notes in her travel journal. But she wasn't sketching architecture. She was mentally mapping the area, calculating escape routes and considering contingencies. Her mind ran simulations. What if an explosion occurred nearby? Where would people go? Which paths were safe? These calculations came effortlessly, honed through years of split-second decisions made in airplanes and training exercises. A nearby television caught her eye. A news bulletin flashed briefly across the screen. Authorities investigate suspicious activity in Central Plaza. Most ignored it, barely glancing at the message before scrolling on their phones. Emma's eyes narrowed. She noted the van again. Its driver appeared nervous, shifting positions constantly, checking a device repeatedly. Her gut tightened. In her experience, ordinary coincidences rarely produced such patterns. She tucked the moment away mentally, observing, waiting, and calculating. She didn't panic. She never did. Panic was useless. Awareness and preparedness saved lives. Continuing along the cobblestone path, she noticed the flow of pedestrians toward the Central Plaza. Street vendors called out, tourists paused for selfies, and the city moved with its usual rhythm, blissfully unaware. Emma observed them carefully, imagining how panic might ripple through the crowd in an emergency. She walked past a public information kiosk and casually asked a local officer if there had been any alerts. The man's expression shifted slightly, betraying concern, but he quickly recovered and muttered something vague about security protocols. Emma filed the response away. It wasn't much, but every piece of information helped complete the puzzle in her mind. Emma ducked into a small near the plaza, ordering an espresso. She sat in a corner seat with a clear view of the area, notebook open but untouched. She didn't need to write. The observations were already stored in her memory. The van remained in sight along with a small cluster of people who seemed out of place. Emma's pulse was steady, her breathing calm. In these moments, she mentally rehearsed what she might need to do: direct civilians, coordinate with responders, and navigate chaotic scenarios. Every tiny detail mattered, from the placement of benches to the accessibility of stairways, the angles of, and the density of pedestrian traffic. Hours passed in quiet observation. Occasionally, tourists glanced at her, smiling at her attentive posture, assuming she was merely curious or artistic. But Emma's calm demeanor concealed a mind running hundreds of calculations per second. She had lived for moments like this: subtle warnings, fleeting cues, and patterns that hinted at danger before it became apparent. She was prepared to act, though the world around her remained unaware of the storm building just beyond the surface. And soon the ordinary day would erupt into extraordinary chaos, revealing a hero hidden in plain sight. Emma had just finished a light lunch at a small bistro near the Central Plaza. Tourists milled about, snapping photos of the fountain and ornate architecture, oblivious to the subtle tension Emma had sensed earlier. She sipped her coffee, her eyes constantly scanning the crowd, noting movements, exits, and potential hazards. Then a distant, thunderous explosion shattered the calm. The sound reverberated off the stone buildings, sending birds into frantic flight and startling the people in the plaza. A thick, acrid smoke rose, curling toward the sky, carrying the smell of burning metal and debris. Panic ignited instantly. Screams pierced the air. Mothers clutched children, tourists dropped cameras and phones, and groups of friends scattered in all directions. The elegant plaza erupted into chaos. People ran blindly, trampling over one another in their desperate attempt to escape the source of the blast. Street performers abandoned instruments mid-song, and a cart carrying fresh pastries overturned, scattering its contents across the cobblestones. Emma's heart rate remained steady, her mind switching into high-alert mode. She knew she had seconds to act. Every instinct honed from years in the cockpit, navigating turbulence, responding to emergencies, and keeping calm under pressure, kicked in. Emma scanned the area swiftly. Hundreds of people were trapped near the fountain and debris blocked some exits. Emergency personnel were rushing to contain the situation, but confusion reigned. She saw a group of tourists frozen in fear, a mother shielding her toddler, and an elderly man attempting to stand alone. Emma moved decisively, her stride quick but controlled. She reached the nearest cluster of panicked civilians and began giving simple, clear instructions. Stay low. Move toward the left exit. Keep calm. Her voice was firm, commanding attention amid the chaos. To everyone around her, she radiated a confidence and authority that demanded trust. Her gaze swept the plaza again, noting dangerous areas, fallen lampposts, sharp debris, and panicked crowd clusters. She adjusted her path and started guiding people toward safer zones, using gestures and short commands. A young man froze, phone in hand, unsure which way to run. Emma placed a steady hand on his shoulder, directing him without hesitation. Every decision was immediate, calculated, precise. She prioritized vulnerable individuals first, the children, the elderly, and those trapped by obstacles. Lives were being saved with each movement, though no one yet realized the depth of her capabilities. Smoke thickened, reducing visibility. People began coughing and stumbling, disoriented. Emma led a line of terrified tourists behind a fallen bench, shielding them from falling debris. She noticed a small child separated from their mother and darted through the chaos to reunite them. Her focus was unshakable. Distractions that would paralyze ordinary people were irrelevant to her. Every action was purposeful, executed with the kind of calm precision that had saved countless lives in high-stress environments before. Observers began whispering, noting her remarkable composure. Who was she? Where had she learned to handle crises so effortlessly? Suddenly, the ground shook again, a tremor from a secondary collapse. People screamed and froze in panic. Emma's instincts told her to act faster, to anticipate the movement of the crowd, and to clear the most at-risk areas immediately. She grabbed the hand of a frightened teenager and pulled them toward an exit, directing others with short, authoritative phrases. Moments like this required absolute clarity, split-second judgment, and courage. Emma's mind processed hundreds of variables simultaneously: which routes were safe, which hazards were moving, and how to prevent stampedes. By the time emergency responders fully realized the scope of the disaster, Emma had already orchestrated the movement of dozens of civilians out of immediate danger. Her calm demeanor and decisive actions created small zones of order amid chaos. People began following her guidance instinctively, trusting the authority she projected. For those witnessing her, she was more than a tourist. She was a beacon in the storm, the first sign of hope in an increasingly terrifying situation. And yet her true identity remained hidden, a secret that would astonish everyone in the hours to come. Emma darted through the smoke-choked plaza, her mind racing yet calm. People scrambled in every direction, some frozen in shock, others stumbling over debris. She realized that instinct alone wasn't enough. Without organization, chaos would cost lives. Spotting a small group trapped near a toppled fountain, she sprinted toward them. "Move with me, stay close, follow my voice," she commanded. Her tone was sharp, unyielding, yet reassuring. Panic gave way to obedience. One by one, she guided them to a safer zone, checking that no one lagged behind, every movement precise, calculated, and deliberate. Nearby, a security officer radioed frantically, overwhelmed by the crowd. Emma grabbed the device, quickly assessing the situation. All units secure exits A and B, move civilians toward safe zones. Keep them calm, she ordered. Her authority was unmistakable, and the officer, sensing competence. Around her, ordinary tourists instinctively fell into line behind her instructions. She became a focal point, a calm center in a maelstrom of fear. Her mind calculated escape routes, crowd dynamics, and the trajectory of falling debris, treating the plaza like the cockpit of a plane navigating turbulence. Emma's attention flicked to a mother shielding her crying toddler. She knelt, smiling gently but firmly, gesturing for them to move along a safer path. With one hand on the child's shoulder, she led them around the collapsing lampposts and scattered debris. A young couple froze near a broken fountain railing, unsure which direction was safe. Emma grabbed their hands, guiding them decisively while keeping her voice steady. She had a method for every scenario: assess, prioritize, execute. Each act, while simple, saved lives. In that moment, she was no longer a tourist. She was a coordinator, a strategist, a hero in action. The plaza erupted with renewed panic as a secondary structure began to crumble. Emma's instincts screamed, act immediately. She sprinted toward the densest crowd cluster, waving her hands to direct people left and right, shouting, "Move now, stay calm, keep low." Her voice cut through the chaos, commanding attention with practiced authority. People instinctively obeyed, following her lead as if drawn by an invisible tether. She adjusted paths on the fly, redirecting those who faltered and ensuring that vulnerable individuals, the elderly, the injured children, moved first. Every action was deliberate, every decision life-saving. Emma noticed a line of people pinned near a stall that had collapsed under the debris. Without hesitation, she crouched and began assisting them, offering hands to lift the injured, guiding the frightened, and ensuring none were left behind. A journalist, previously filming the scene, stared in awe at her calm demeanor, whispering to colleagues, "Who is she?" Emma didn't pause for recognition. She was entirely focused on the task at hand. Every movement reflected her ability to remain composed under pressure, a skill forged in emergencies far removed from a tourist's ordinary experience. Minutes felt like hours as Emma continued coordinating evacuations, guiding people toward relative safety while preventing stampedes. She used every tactic in her mental arsenal: clear commands, prioritization, and controlled movements. Her presence gave people a rare sense of order amidst chaos. Authorities began to notice her efficiency, deferring to her instructions, even as the crisis continued to unfold. The plaza, once pure pandemonium, began to see pockets of organized evacuation thanks to her intervention. By the time the smoke began to thin slightly, Emma had successfully moved hundreds of people away from immediate danger. Her calm authority and decisive actions transformed panic into survival. Observers whispered about the mysterious, composed woman leading civilians, as if she had rehearsed the disaster. Little did anyone know, she had, through years of aviation training, emergency simulations, and instinct honed under pressure. Emma's ordinary exterior concealed an extraordinary capability, and the world would soon witness the full extent of her heroism. Emma's heart remained steady, though adrenaline surged through her veins. The secondary collapse had left a cluster of hundreds trapped near the plaza's northern edge, where a partially damaged building threatened to crumble further. Smoke and dust choked the air, obscuring visibility. Panic had returned in waves. People screamed, pushed, and froze in fear. Emma assessed the situation in seconds, noting the safest escape route: a narrow access ladder leading up to a terrace that could provide temporary refuge for those trapped below. It was risky, unstable, partially damaged, and only someone with courage and precise skill could navigate it safely. Without hesitation, Emma sprinted toward the ladder, weaving through throngs of frightened civilians. She barked instructions: "Stay low, follow my voice, don't push." Her commands cut through the chaos, and people instinctively obeyed. Mothers clutched their children, and elderly citizens held onto one another, trusting her implicitly. Emma's movements were efficient, unhesitating. Every action was a combination of instinct, training, and intuition, honed from years of emergency situations in airplanes. She scanned the area, noting loose debris, falling masonry and panic-induced hazards, recalculating safe paths in real time. Reaching the ladder, she paused just long enough to assess its stability. It swayed slightly under the weight of dust and vibrations from the ongoing collapse, but it was the only option. Emma secured a rope she carried in her bag, an emergency precaution she always kept, and tied it to a sturdy railing. She turned to the trapped civilians below. "One at a time, follow the rope, I'll guide you." Her voice, calm yet commanding, reassured them. One by one, people began climbing, trembling but guided by her steady hands and clear directions. Children were lifted, the elderly supported, and everyone followed her instructions without hesitation. A young boy stumbled halfway up, his grip slipping on the narrow ladder. Emma lunged, steadying him with one hand while keeping the rope secure with the other. "You've got this, don't let go," she encouraged. The boy's mother clutched him from below, tears streaming down her face. Emma's calm composure, her decisive actions, prevented a tragedy that could have claimed lives in seconds. Nearby, an injured man struggled to ascend, groaning in pain. Emma guided him firmly, supporting his weight and ensuring he didn't panic. Every second mattered, and her precise coordination made the difference between life and death. Above, the terrace offered a temporary safe zone. Emma helped people onto it, checking that each individual was stable before sending the next. Smoke swirled around her, dust settling on hair and clothes, but she remained focused, undistracted by the chaos that had engulfed the plaza. Her voice was a beacon, her hands steady and her eyes sharp, guiding people through impossible circumstances. Observers on the ground whispered among themselves. Who was this woman, acting with such authority and skill? She moved with the precision of someone who had faced life-or-death situations before. Minutes stretched like hours as Emma continued rescuing people from the collapsing area. Each person safely guided added to her growing sense of responsibility. Every second wasted could cost lives. She coordinated with arriving emergency responders, directing them to the most critical zones. Even they, trained for emergencies, deferred to her, recognizing competence and leadership beyond ordinary expectations. Her actions were methodical, fearless, and profoundly human, heroism in its form. Finally, the last group climbed to safety. Emma stood on the terrace, catching her breath, eyes scanning the plaza. 320 lives had been spared, thanks to her courage and precision. The crowd looked at her with awe, gratitude, and disbelief. She had faced the critical moment without hesitation, transforming panic into survival. Yet no one yet knew her full identity, an ordinary tourist. Far from it. Emma was about to reveal her extraordinary secret, changing everyone's perception forever. The smoke finally began to clear, leaving the plaza littered with debris, overturned carts, and shaken civilians. Emma stepped down from the terrace, brushing dust from her jacket. Around her, survivors huddled in small groups, checking on one another, their faces pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who is she? How did she stay so calm? She saved hundreds of lives. Emma's gaze moved across the crowd, noting every person she had guided to safety. Mothers clutched their children tightly. Young adults hugged strangers in relief, and emergency responders paused, stunned by the precision and efficiency she had displayed amid chaos. A city official, approaching cautiously, extended a hand. "Miss, we need your name. Who are you? That was extraordinary." Emma smiled faintly, her calm demeanor unbroken. She knew this moment would astonish many. "I'm Emma Carter," she said quietly. Murmurs rose among the onlookers, curious and expectant. Then almost casually she added, "I'm a licensed commercial airline pilot." Silence fell over the plaza. Cameras clicked furiously as journalists captured every word. People stared at her, trying to reconcile the image of the ordinary tourist with the extraordinary skill and authority she had displayed moments earlier. Questions came rapidly. "A pilot? You're a pilot? You've been trained for this," Emma nodded, eyes scanning the plaza again to ensure everyone remained safe. She spoke simply, without arrogance, describing her background. Years of flight school, emergency drills, and navigating life-or-death situations hundreds of feet in the air. She explained that the instincts which guided her through crises at 30,000 feet applied perfectly to the chaos on the ground. The crowd listened, mesmerized. Each word added depth to the image they had just witnessed. The calm, decisive woman had not only acted, but executed her actions with professional precision. One survivor, a mother with her child in tow, approached hesitantly. I can't thank you enough," she stammered, tears streaming. Emma knelt, smiling gently. "You don't need to, you're safe, and that's what matters." Her humility struck a chord with everyone nearby. Authorities, who had initially been skeptical of her intervention, now praised her openly, acknowledging that her rapid assessment and leadership had likely prevented further casualties. Television crews and reporters recorded the interactions, their astonished voices narrating the unfolding revelation. This wasn't a stranger. This was a trained professional, a hero disguised in plain sight. Social media exploded within minutes. Videos of her guiding people, directing authorities, and calmly rescuing civilians circulated globally. Commenters called her a guardian angel, miracle worker, and the calm in the storm. Yet Emma remained grounded. She offered no grandiose statements or self-congratulatory speeches. Her focus remained on the survivors, the children reunited with parents, the elderly helped to benches, and the injured attended by paramedics. She reminded herself quietly that heroism was not about recognition. It was about action, skill, and compassion when it mattered most. Flashbacks to her pilot training ran through her mind. Emergency landings, engine failures, and cockpit crises where every second counted. The discipline, mental rehearsal, and split-second decision-making she had honed in those tense situations had translated seamlessly to the plaza. In the air or on the ground, calm under pressure, prioritization, and decisive action were the difference between life and death. People marveled at her poise, but to Emma, it had been instinctual, almost second nature. A reminder that ordinary appearances often hide extraordinary capabilities. As evening descended on the plaza, Emma stood quietly, observing the scene. Survivors shared hugs, authorities coordinated cleanup, and journalists chronicled every detail. The city, once rattled by fear, had been saved by an individual who blended into ordinary life so effortlessly that no one could have predicted her heroism. The world had just witnessed a revelation. Courage, skill, and bravery often reside in the most unassuming forms. Emma Carter, seemingly just another tourist, had become a symbol of extraordinary human potential, quiet, humble, and undeniably heroic. The plaza was quieting, though traces of chaos remained: overturned carts, scattered debris, and the lingering smell of smoke. Survivors gathered in small groups, murmuring in disbelief, recounting how they had been saved by the calm, commanding woman at the heart of the disaster. Emma Carter moved among them, checking on those she had guided, asking quietly if they were all right. Mothers clutched children, young couples embraced, and strangers shared tears of relief. Despite the enormity of the situation, Emma's composure remained unwavering. She spoke softly to each survivor, offering reassurance without seeking attention, her focus entirely on those whose lives she had touched. News crews began to swarm, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. "Miss Carter, how did you know what to do?" one reporter asked. Emma's response was simple, almost matter-of-fact. "I stayed calm, observed the situation, and focused on keeping people safe." She downplayed the extraordinary nature of her actions, emphasizing the teamwork of emergency personnel and the resilience of the civilians themselves. Yet every gesture she made, every instruction she had given earlier, had revealed a depth of skill and courage that left even seasoned responders in awe. Social media was already ablaze, clips of her directing civilians and guiding the injured viral within minutes. City officials approached, expressing formal gratitude and admiration. "We cannot thank you enough," one said, shaking her hand firmly. "You saved hundreds of lives today. Your actions were remarkable." Emma nodded, her humility intact, insisting that the real heroes were the responders, volunteers, and ordinary citizens who had helped each other survive. Yet even as she spoke, journalists and onlookers couldn't help but be drawn to the quiet authority she exuded, the very presence that had transformed panic into organized action. Her calmness had inspired trust when fear might have paralyzed everyone else. Paramedics and police shared their accounts of the rescue. "She moved through that crowd like she knew every step before it happened," one officer remarked. "Every instruction she gave was precise. It's unbelievable for someone who was supposedly a tourist." Survivors told similar stories. A young woman tearfully recounted how Emma had held her hand while guiding her to safety, whispering words of reassurance, while an elderly man described being lifted over debris with unshakable determination. Across interviews, the same pattern emerged. Emma's ordinary appearance belied extraordinary bravery. Social media users coined nicknames for her: the Paris Guardian, the calm heroine, Pilot Angel. Her story spread globally, inspiring millions. Commenters highlighted her humility, her courage, and the fact that she had acted instinctively to save lives, without regard for recognition or reward. Videos of her calmly directing evacuees played repeatedly, each frame illustrating a lesson in leadership under pressure. Schools, emergency response teams, and public organizations shared her story as an example of heroism, preparedness, and the impact of selfless action in a crisis. Even as accolades poured in, Emma remained grounded. She quietly visited hospitals where some survivors were treated, checking on the injured and offering words of encouragement. Nurses, doctors, and families expressed astonishment at her involvement, noting that she had stayed with people long after the initial rescue, ensuring comfort and calm. The human element of her heroism, the compassion, patience, and unwavering dedication, was as remarkable as the physical bravery she had displayed in the plaza. As evening settled over the city, Emma returned to a quiet she had visited days before, sipping coffee and reflecting on the events. She thought about the lives saved, the fear she had witnessed, and the extraordinary resilience of ordinary people. The plaza would eventually be cleaned. The news cycle would continue, but the memory of that day and the quiet heroism of Emma Carter would remain etched in the minds of hundreds forever. In the aftermath, one undeniable truth stood clear. Courage often walks among us, unnoticed, waiting for the moment to reveal itself. Weeks had passed since the chaos erupted in the plaza, but the memory of that day lingered in the hearts of those who survived. Paris had returned to its normal rhythm, buzzing, tourists wandering, street performers playing. But for many, nothing would ever feel entirely ordinary again. Emma Carter walked quietly along the Seine, observing the city as it shimmered under the afternoon sun. People recognized her now, some smiling in gratitude, others nodding respectfully. She returned the gestures with modest acknowledgement, never dwelling on the attention. In her mind, the real work had already been done. Hundreds of lives saved, families reunited, and a city reminded of the fragility of life. The media had chronicled her heroism extensively. Interviews, news segments, and viral social media posts painted a picture of an ordinary woman who had performed extraordinary feats. She had become an international symbol of courage, yet Emma remained grounded. She visited hospitals discreetly, checking on the injured and speaking softly with those still shaken by the disaster. Nurses and doctors marveled at her humility. "Most heroes rush to headlines," one remarked. "She rushes to the people who need her most." Her actions were a testament to the quiet, selfless nature of true heroism, a hero who acted not for praise, but for human life. Emma often thought back to the events in the plaza. Every decision she had made, every split-second choice, had been a product of instinct, training, and preparation. Years as a commercial airline pilot had honed her mind for emergencies, assessing risks, prioritizing, and executing decisions without hesitation. But beyond the technical skill was the deeper understanding of responsibility, the knowledge that ordinary moments could demand extraordinary action. She reflected on how calm observation, careful planning, and decisive action had saved hundreds of lives. And she knew that the bravery she had witnessed in others, people helping strangers, comforting the frightened, was just as remarkable as her own. The city continued to honor her in subtle ways. Survivors spoke at local events, sharing stories of the calm, composed woman who had guided them to safety. Social media continued to celebrate her courage, inspiring others to recognize that heroism could reside in anyone, in the most ordinary of people. Emma's story became a lesson in preparedness, humility, and the power of composed action during crises. Schools incorporated her story into lessons about courage, responsibility, and the importance of remaining calm under pressure. Her example showed that heroism often hides behind unassuming appearances, waiting for a moment to manifest. For Emma, life slowly returned to routine. She resumed flying, visiting familiar skis with the same focus and care she had brought to the plaza. Yet something fundamental had shifted. She carried the memories of that day, the faces of the people she had saved, and the realization that even ordinary appearances could hide extraordinary potential. Paris had been changed forever, but so had she, reminded that courage is not always announced, and that true heroism often walks unnoticed until circumstances demand it. In quiet moments, she reflected on the meaning of what had transpired. Life could change in an instant, and people often underestimated their own capabilities. She understood that heroism was not measured by accolades or recognition, but by the lives one impacted, the calm in a storm, and the choices made in critical moments. Emma had been a tourist, blending seamlessly into a foreign city, but she had been much more than that, a guardian, a leader, and a symbol of resilience. As the sun set over the Seine, Emma sat on a bench, watching the water ripple in gold and amber hues. The city's lights began to glow, casting reflections across the river. She smiled faintly, thinking of the lives she had touched and the courage she had witnessed. Ordinary people, extraordinary actions, and the quiet strength that lies within us all. Emma Carter had shown the world that heroism does not always announce itself, but it always matters when it does. And in that moment, she knew that even the simplest lives could ripple outward, leaving a legacy far greater than anyone could imagine.